According to Jack Lasky's journal, Body Snatching from the Salem Press Encyclopedia, surgeons were curious on what the actual anatomy of a human being looked like during the Victorian times. Surgeons were also only limited to animals, such as pigs and monkeys, to dissect, and rarely had the chance to perform anatomical dissections on humans. Thus, surgeons wanted a quick and feasible way to actually get cadavers. Subsequently, they reached out to people in need of money and hired them to snatch bodies from graves. Body snatchers were then named resurrectionists. According to Susan Allen's The Annotated A Tale of Two Cities, a reader's companion with 780 notes, England didn't have a legitimate police force until 1829, and resurrectionists were rarely caught by grave guards because most grave guards were usually bribed or fell asleep on the job. Although grave digging was a labor-intensive profession, grave diggers invented simple tactics to exhume the body with ease. According to Jack Lasky, spies were sometimes sent to the funeral of the wanted cadaver and would make observations of the best approach to exhume. According to John McLeod's article, Truth About Edinburgh's Gruesome Resurrectionists, the stealing of a dead body was not a felony in England. It was only a felony if you took objects the corpse had on them or in the coffin. McLeod states that a dead body belonged to no one, and thus gravediggers were rarely prosecuted due to this law. Suzanne Allen also highlights that religion often made them reluctant to perform body snatching. Body snatching went against all rules of religious morals, and citizens who did perform body snatching were looked down upon. Jack Lasky also states that the general public viewed dissection as a mutilation that not only left a person's physical remains maimed and dismembered, but also caused similar damage to a person's soul. New graves were often favored by resurrectionists because the exhumation was a lot shorter and easier with fresh dug-up dirt. The graves of the wealthy were usually harder to dig due to the elaborate crypts they were built in. Diane Yancey's book about Charles Dickinson's life in England also suggests that graveyards were often very crowded, and sometimes bodies were stacked on top of each other. According to historian Evelyn Richards, bodies were more valuable if they were fresh, so resurrectionists started murdering people in order to gain more money. In 1827, Burke and Hare, two infamous gravediggers, murdered 16 men and sold them to Robert Knox's medical school. According to Fiona Hines' journal about the 1832 Anatomy Act, when the public and English Parliament discovered these murders, the 1832 Anatomy Act was put in place in order to solve the cadaver shortage and thus prevent body snatching. Doctors had more freedom to perform anatomical dissections, and cadavers were also mainly sourced from unclaimed bodies from public institutions or donations, rather than resurrections. The dire needs of the money during the French Revolution led poor people to take part in grave robbing. According to Lasky, the afflicted families of stolen bodies usually tried to prevent grave robbing. Whether it was protesting against medical centers or putting metal cages, also known as mort safes, over the grave. Special alarms, extra layers of straw, and coffins of lead and iron were often good substitutes as well. Most of our knowledge from medicine today is directly stemmed from the actions of these grave robbers. With the abundance of bodies, doctors were able to finally understand what made the human body so unique. Suzanne Allen underlines the lack of a solid police force at the time. According to Ruth Richardson's article, A Potted History of Specimen Taking, one case even shows that Charles Byron paid to be buried at sea. However, because his undertaker was bribed with money, his body was taken to Hunter's Dissection Center instead. According to Rosemary T. Van Artel's article about Charles Dickens's life and childhood, Charles Dickens had a very poor family and witnessed the poverty of England. In his writing, he acknowledges the viciousness and unfairness of the poor law system. In A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens uses Jerry Cruncher to symbolize part of the poor population and expresses the desperation of the poor in England. In the novel, Mrs. Cruncher prays to God to forgive her of her husband's sin, the honest trade of grave digging. However, instead of letting the bodies uselessly rot in the ground, Jerry Cruncher digs up the corpses, where they are recalled to life and used to further our knowledge of medicine. Lasky includes that without the courageous gravediggers and doctors, our understanding of modern medicine